The Palestinian Refugee Agency says more children have been killed in Gaza in the past 4 months than in 4 years of conflict worldwide.
In a state TV interview, President Putin said Russia is ready to use nuclear weapons, but warned against the US triggering a conflict.
Conditions are deteriorating for asylum seekers in Dublin amid a surge in numbers and slow processing times.
More funerals in Gaza. Many of those dead in Israel's latest strike in the central city of Deir al-Balah are children. In a post on X, Philippe Lazzarini, head of the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, described the ongoing offensive in Gaza as a war against children. He says more children have died in the Palestinian enclave in the past 4 months than the number of children killed worldwide in 4 years of war. Data from the United Nations and the Palestinian Ministry of Health in Gaza shows the death toll as having surpassed the global amount of 12,300. Amid horrific scenes of babies and children suffering terrible injuries and trauma as a result of the fighting, Lazzarini called for an immediate ceasefire for their sake. And for those who've not been wounded, another threat, that of famine. Only a lucky few receive a hot meal as aid trickles into the embattled enclave.
The Russian army attacked Sumy with a Shahed UAV overnight, hitting a residential building, Ukrainian authorities said. Fire broke out at the site of the attack, which is still under investigation. At least 10 people were rescued from the rubble, 8 of them with injuries of varying severity.
И вот что получилось. Я вот на втором этаже, наша квартира на втором этаже. У нас ребенок маленький. Как мы уцелели?
Russian authorities reported another major attack by Ukrainian drones early on Wednesday, injuring at least 2 people and sparking a fire. In a state TV interview, President Putin said Russia is ready to use nuclear weapons, but warned against the US triggering a conflict.
Наша триада, ядерная триада, она является более современной, чем любая другая триада. Таких триад только вот у нас, да, американцев. Они развивают все свои компоненты. Мы тоже. Но это не значит, что, на мой взгляд, они не готовы завтра развязать эту ядерную войну. Но хотят, ну что ж так делать? Мы готовы.
Putin also said US President Biden was a veteran politician who fully understands possible dangers of nuclear escalation.
On Monday, Ukraine's foreign ministry summoned the Vatican's nuncio to Ukraine to express disappointment with the pontiff's recent comments. In an interview with Swiss broadcaster RSI, the Pope suggested that Ukraine should show the courage to raise the white flag and open talks with Russia to end the 2-year conflict. We met the papal ambassador in Kyiv and asked him for his take on Pope Francis' words.
Penso che uno degli aspetti di queste parole del Papa sia stato chiarito abbastanza bene, che evidentemente Papa non si riferiva a una resa, e la stessa parola negoziato, che cosa significa? Come ha spiegato Cardinale Parolin, segretario di Stato, significa un invito a tutte le parti, e in più il primo passo del cessate il fuoco per creare le condizioni per un negoziato spetta all'aggressore, alla Russia, ma si potrebbe aggiungere che il concetto stesso del negoziato, quando lo affrontiamo a occhio disarmato, potrebbe suonare ingenuo, viste le esperienze negative degli ultimi anni, anche in questa guerra di aggressione della Russia contro l'Ucraina. E quindi l'invito del Papa è quello di superare le esperienze negative e cercare i modi, che potrebbero essere anche nuovi, cercare un negoziato che sia giusto, che sia rispettoso, che non danneggi, ma che rispetti soprattutto l'Ucraina e le vite umane.
But alongside diplomatic efforts, aid provided by the Catholic Church in Ukraine plays a crucial role, as the Apostolic Nuncio explains.
Se cominciamo dal Papa, c'è l'ospedale del Papa, Bambin Gesù a Roma, il quale ha accolto oltre 2500, forse anche oltre, bambini ucraini. Non sono soltanto aiuti umanitari perché sono vari tipi di aiuti, ma anche direttamente il Santo Padre attraverso il Cardinale Krajewski, oppure le chiese o le Caritas. Il volume degli aiuti stiamo ancora cercando di capire tutto il volume perché sono dati molto alti.
Giorgio Orlandi for Euronews in Kyiv, Ukraine.
Leonid Volkov, a close ally of late Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny, is attacked in Lithuania's capital Vilnius. A spokesperson for Navalny said that Volkov was attacked as a man smashed a window of his car and hit him with a hammer. The attack was confirmed by Lithuania's foreign minister, who called it shocking on social media. No suspects have currently been identified. The attack comes nearly a month after Navalny was pronounced dead in an Arctic penal colony. His death has been widely blamed on the Kremlin, who have denied involvement. Volkov is a close ally of Navalny and helped him run several election campaigns, including one convincing voters to turn away from Putin in the upcoming presidential election. He left Russia several years ago under pressure from authorities.
Conditions are deteriorating for asylum seekers in Dublin amid a surge in numbers and slow processing times. Outbreaks of scabies and respiratory illnesses have been reported among those camped out in front of the applications office headquarters in Dublin. With no more emergency accommodation available, at least 200 people have been living in tents for weeks.
We get very easy sick illnesses because of sanitary condition almost impossible. For toilet, you must find out somewhere in Dublin city. There is no toilet, public toilet, no public shower. Dealing with such things is very, very difficult.
In a situation like this with no opportunity for sanitation and no availability of washing machine facilities to do hot washes for their bedding and their clothes, it's going to be very difficult to treat, and it's quite contagious. So with everyone living on top of each other with these poor conditions, that was going to be very difficult to get on top of.
Some 13,000 people sought asylum in Ireland in 2023, with demands continuing to grow during the first month of 2024. That's on top of the more than 100,000 Ukrainians who have sought refuge in the country. Amid one of Europe's worst housing crises, authorities are struggling to cope with the unprecedented demand.
A courtroom in Oslo at the start of the trial of Iranian-born Norwegian Zaniar Matapur. He's accused of conducting a deadly shooting rampage at a gay bar in the city in 2022 during the annual Pride celebrations. He's pleaded not guilty of committing terrorism and murder. 2 people were killed, 9 others suffered gunshot wounds, and 25 others were injured after the shooting. Described by the police as a radicalized Islamist, Matapur was apprehended near the scene within minutes of the attack. If found guilty, he faces 30 years in prison.
The European Parliament has approved the first artificial intelligence law in the world by overwhelming majority. The text sets a risk-based approach that goes from marking when images have been generated by AI to completely banning some uses. Some of those are systems that use ethnical, religious, or facial traits to identify people or the recognition of emotions.
We prohibit the emotion recognition of workers and students. There will be no possibility for an employer to look for the emotions of the employee, which is something that we think is not acceptable in Europe.
But some of those bans will have exceptions if used by security forces. This was the biggest disagreement between Parliament, who aimed for a complete prohibition, and the member states, wanting an exemption to use those systems in the case of a terrorist attack or human trafficking.
We've introduced judicial redress and judicial authorization as a mandatory step in allowing for this use of technology. We've limited the scope of use to a very strict set of crimes, the most serious crimes, to make sure that, again, law enforcement will not be tempted to deploy this technology in public spaces all the time.
But some MEPs think the law legitimizes the misuse of AI technology.
No terrorist has been found using real-time mass surveillance, but it has a very chilling effect. It discriminates against minorities because these are oftentimes wrongly reported.
Vote is closed.
After formal approval by member states, the law will be published around May. In November, bans will enter into force, and by 2027, the AI Act will be fully functioning.
Thank you.
President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump clinched their party's presidential nominations on Tuesday with decisive victories in low-profile primaries.
Let me say a few things.
The outcome of contests across Georgia, Mississippi and Washington state was never in doubt, but gave each candidate the majority they needed to claim the party's nomination.
I think it's going to be inspiring because
the votes mean that Biden and Trump will definitely be facing a rematch in the upcoming fall election. A private sector rocket, thought to be the first to launch into orbit in Japan, exploded shortly after liftoff on Wednesday. Footage showed the rocket, called Kairos, blasting off from the Wakayama prefecture in central Japan, exploding mid-air within seconds from takeoff. A huge plume of smoke engulfed the area, and flames could also be seen in some spots. The video then showed spurts of water shooting toward that spot in an effort to put out the blaze.